Here it is, your year-end countdown of the best albums of 2018. These are the albums that made the biggest impact on me and many other listeners over the course of the past year. Will your favorite music make the list? Find out next on Track by Track. Hey everybody, my name's Kyle and this is Track by Track, music reviews, news, and commentary. Thanks for tuning in today, and if this is your first time here, please take a second to click subscribe so that you won't miss future reviews and more. So as a year of music, I have to say that 2018 was decent. Not great, but decent. It was a year where I found myself pleasantly surprised by albums from newer artists, while albums from many more established acts didn't move the needle as much as I hoped they would. On top of that, there was the absence of new music from a handful of artists that we all expected to hear from in 2018. Acts that 12 months ago I would have been sure would be on this countdown. Go back and watch my 2018 preview video and see if you can spot the acts that we're still waiting for in 2019. But I don't want to take anything away from the great music we did here in 2018. I feel good about my list, but also more than a little surprised at how it turned out. But I have to offer the same disclaimer as I did last year, and that's that any best of list is really a matter of personal taste. I call these the best albums of 2018, but I could just as easily call them my favorites. This is the music that most resonated with me over the course of the year. That's important for you to keep in mind because there's bound to be several noteworthy and critically acclaimed albums that many others are talking about that didn't land in my top 10. Now, some should be obvious. If you watch my channel, you shouldn't be surprised that albums by Cardi B and Janelle Monáe that rank high on many other year-end lists won't appear on mine. I sampled both albums, and all I can say is, it's not for me. I also want to comment on two other high-profile albums, though, that many others loved but just didn't work for me. I spent time with both Golden Hour by Casey Musgraves and By the Way, I Forgive You by Brandi Carlile. In both cases, it was easy for me to see how these albums transcend genre and struck a chord with so many listeners. Ultimately, though, they just didn't resonate as strongly for me. Now, that certainly doesn't mean that I didn't think they were good albums, but music should move you. And for my top 10, I want to present the albums that moved me the most. These are the albums that I found myself most drawn into. The albums that I put on repeat. The albums I found myself returning to throughout the year. These are the albums that I found to be the most original or innovative or fresh. And hopefully, these are the albums we'll still be listening to in 2019 and beyond. So with all that said, one final reminder before we start the countdown. I'll include Amazon links in the description below for all the albums that I've talked about in this video. Be sure to click those to add any of this music to your personal collection. All right? All right. Let the countdown begin. Kicking off the list at number 10 is the only artist that actually made my top 10 in 2017 as well. And since this was a December album release, they just barely made it in time. LP is certainly one of my favorite new voices of the past few years. Well, new in terms of finally starting to break through as a solo artist. Although LP has released 5 albums between 2001 and 2018, the bulk of her musical success comes from songwriting for acts like Rihanna, Cher, and Christina Aguilera. But with last year's release of Lost on You, LP finally started to get some of the attention she deserved as an artist in her own right. This year's Heart to Mouth is yet another strong effort that deserves a wider audience. It's an album full of infectious pop rock songs, all anchored around one of the most distinctive female voices you're likely to hear. This one is highly recommended. Coming in at number 9 is Lush by Snail. Now, I have to offer an apology on this one. See, when this album came out back in June, I had it in heavy rotation, and I knew it was likely to land on my best of the year list. So I started work on a review video for you, but I ended up scrapping it because, honestly, some of the other indie acts that I'd done videos on just weren't getting watched. And I get it, we're all more strongly drawn to more familiar names. I just hope that Lindsay Jordan's Snail Mail ends up becoming more familiar to more listeners. I really love her lo-fi indie rock vibe. There's almost a sort of 90s throwback quality to songs like Heatwave and Pristine that feels a bit like when Liz Phair was starting out, but maybe just a little bit safer. My number 8 album of 2018 actually fits in the same indie rock category as Snail Mail, and that's Clean by Soccer Mommy. When I reviewed this album back in March, I gave it a rating of 6 out of 10. in the months that have passed, this one's proven to be a grower for me. I've definitely enjoyed it more and more as the year has gone on. I really love the dreamy textures that singer-songwriter Sophie Allison creates in her music, all awash in droning guitar and reverb. This is bedroom pop at its best, again bringing to mind Liz Phair, but it also has echoes of newer acts like Phoebe Bridgers and Julian Baker. In fact, Sophie Allison would have been a great fourth member of indie female supergroup Boy Genius. Clean by Soccer Mommy is a terrific breakthrough album to be sure, but if you like this album, I strongly recommend digging into her previous Bandcamp releases. You won't be disappointed. When the 2019 Grammy nominations were announced recently, I was thrilled to see my number 7 artist recognized for his work. PJ Morton's day job may be acting as keyboardist for Maroon 5, but as strong as his 2018 solo album was, I think he should consider ditching Adam Levine and the boys. Gumbo Unplugged is actually a live album, a complete live recording of Morton's 2017 studio album. I'd never heard Morton before Gumbo Unplugged, so this album was my first exposure to his Stevie Wonder in the 70s kind of sound. And when I went back and listened to the studio version of the album, I was equally impressed. I'd probably return to the studio Gumbo more than the live version, if I'm being honest, but when I saw Morton's 3 Grammy nominations for Unplugged, I couldn't have been happier. Maybe now he'll release it on CD instead of only digital. Hey, I know, I'm old-fashioned that way. At number 6 on my list of the best albums of 2018 is the sophomore album from Aussie indie darling Courtney Barnett. Tell Me How You Really Feel is probably as strong a follow-up as one could reasonably hope for to her incredible debut release 3 years prior. That album easily topped my list of the best of 2015. On her latest effort, Barnett continues to follow her own unique path, delivering songs with the same kind of witty storytelling that endeared her to fans in the first place. She still celebrates the profound in the mundane, but there's maybe a bit more world weariness to her outlook in 2018. That's to be expected, I think, and it lends the lyrics and the characters in her songs a sense of sincerity. After all, in terms of musical success, Barnett is a long way from where she was when she started, and I, for one, am thrilled that she didn't succumb to the mythical sophomore slump. Unless, of course, you consider her lackluster 2017 duet album with Kurt Weill to be her true sophomore effort. Regardless, with Tell Me How You Really Feel, all is forgiven. As we round the halfway mark on the countdown, we land on a true rock and roll legend. Johnny Marr is best known as the guitarist for the iconic new wave band The Smiths, but even if he didn't have that to his credit, his work as a sideman in so many other projects would still make him worthy of admiration. But after years of playing on albums by acts as diverse as Talking Heads, Pet Shop Boys, Beck, Pearl Jam, and Oasis, it's been exciting to see Marr finally embrace the spotlight on his own over the past 5 or 6 years. 2018's Call the Comet marks Johnny Marr's 3rd straight home run as a solo act, and while he may play it a bit safe here, not straying too far from what's worked so well for him on the past 2 albums, it's hard to be critical about that choice when the music works so well. That's why Call the Comet ranks at number 5 on this year's list. Speaking of rock legends, at number 4 we have the rock and roll return of Elvis Costello. After almost a decade of exploring music in more diverse genres, Look Now finds Costello getting back to his roots. More specifically, the roots of rock that inspired him in the first place. Although this is the first appearance of his band the Imposters since 2008, you'd be forgiven for not recognizing them at first. Costello has transformed the group into a blue-eyed soul quartet for this outing, channeling the retro sound of Dusty Springfield, but updating it for a new era. This is easily Costello's best work in at least a decade, and I'm not just saying that to make up for the Twitter beef that he had with me earlier this year. Look Now has a vitality to it that is sadly uncommon in releases by many of Elvis Costello's veteran rock peers. Legends take note. This is how you do it. Coming in at number 3 is future rock legend Florence and the Machine. It feels slightly petty to call the album High as Hope a return to form for this act. After all, they've only released 4 studio albums so far, and it isn't as if 2015's How Big, How Blue, How Beautiful was a dud. It's just that the first 2 albums were such epic musical statements on every possible level that it was bordering on unsustainable. I don't think that High as Hope soars to the same heights as Lungs and Ceremonials, but rather it evolves into something that instead feels grandiose in a more earthbound way. Singer Florence Welch still has the voice of an angel, but everything feels so much more organic on this album. I think that's a brilliant foundation to build her musical legacy upon, and I have no doubt that this album, along with the first two, will still be revered and celebrated decades from today. All right, now earlier I talked about how I didn't review Snail Mail because new and lesser known artists just don't seem to draw many viewers. And number 2 on my list of the best albums of 2018 is a perfect example of this. Back in June, I reviewed Colored by Priscilla Renea. You probably don't know her name, but you've probably heard her songs. She's written hits for artists ranging from Demi Lovato to Chris Brown to Fifth Harmony, as well as Madonna, Mary J. Blige, Mariah Carey, Kelly Clarkson, Sia, Miranda Lambert, and Carrie Underwood. In spite of her pop songwriting success, Renea is a bit more of a Nashville girl at heart, and on her 2018 solo album Colored, she's created a fascinating genre blend of country and R&B. And if that wasn't enough to pique your curiosity, let me say that the songcraft here is also top-notch. This is easily one of the freshest sounding albums I've heard in a long time, and it's a crime that it hasn't made Priscilla Renea a household name. And you know, I pretty much said as much in my review 6 months ago. A video viewed less than 200 times so far, so I gotta wonder, what are you guys doing? You're missing out on some truly great music. But here's your second chance. Don't sleep on this one. I said it before and I'll say it again. Colored by Priscilla Renea is one of the best albums of the year. But the top honor, the best album of 2018, that goes to yet another I Told You So album, and that's Be the Cowboy by Mitski. What this album achieves in its lean 32-minute runtime is truly remarkable. Here we have 14 vibrant and innovative indie rock tracks that are teeming with so much vitality and lyrical immediacy that the brisk pace of this album leaves the listener almost breathless, even in its brevity. Mitski's music calls to mind the kinetic energy of St. Vincent, the quirkiness of the Magnetic Fields, and occasionally even the ferocity of the Pixies. At other turns, she bears her soul as if she were Tori Amos, if only to channel the Beatles on the very next track, or the supersonics of one of my other top 10 artists this year, Florence and the Machine. Be the Cowboy may well be the most exciting album of the year for a long list of reasons, making Mitski one of the most exciting contemporary artists recording today. But don't just take my word for it. Frankly, it's no surprise to see her landing at or near the top of a lot of year-end lists, and she deserves it. Be the Cowboy by Mitski, my #1 album for 2018. So there you go, my top 10 albums of 2018. I do also want to give honorable mention to a few other strong albums that didn't quite crack the top 10. Those include Tomorrow's Daughter, Matthew Sweet's companion album to last year's Tomorrow Forever, which landed in my top 10. When My Heart Felt Volcanic, the promising debut album from the all-girl pop group The Aces. Offerings by Typhoon, the dark and brooding concept album that gave 2018 such a strong start. And finally, Bad Witch, the dramatic final chapter in a trilogy of releases from 9 Inch Nails, where the band definitely saved their best for last. I reviewed all of these albums here on this channel, as well as most of the albums in my top 10, and you can find all of those reviews on my Best of 2018 playlist that I'll link to right here. And don't forget, if you want to add any of these albums to your personal collection, which I highly recommend, you'll find Amazon links down in the description below. Once again, my name's Kyle, and this has been Track by Track. If you liked this video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up. Plus, check out some of these other videos below that I think you might also enjoy. And of course, be sure to subscribe, because true music fans always want new releases the day they come out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.